welcome to Boardgames with Niramas. I'm Joseph, or Niramas as I'm called on the internet, and I'm going to start a new series of Terraforming Mars videos. So it's going to be top 5 of different things. First of all, we have top 5 beginner tips. So I'm going to give you my best 5 tips for beginners in Terraforming Mars. And it's top 5, but it's not that important in which order I say these things, really. It could be some importance, but yeah, it's just 5 tips that gets you sort of faster into this wonderful game of Terraforming Mars, published by Stronghold Games and Fryxgames and designed by Jacob. And so first of all, we are beginners. We have a beginner corporation. Down here we are starting out with 42 credits and 10 cards. And so my first tip for beginners in Terraforming Mars . So, number 5, my first tip for beginners here in Terraforming Mars is that you need to manage your hand size. You need to keep track of how many cards are you supposed to keep. So you start with 10 cards, you get to keep all of those, so you don't need to wonder, I mean, that's just a given. Although there could be some interesting things here as well. Another tip, by the way, just an extra one, is to sort these cards. I used to sort them by the price, so I have the cheapest one first here. You could sort them in different ways, of course. I mean, if it's a green or blue card and so on. So, I mean, just try out whatever works for you. But some sort of organizing here is needed, because you start with 10 cards. And at the beginning of this, when you start playing this game, that's a lot of cards. So you have to like go through them and what is this? What does this card do and all that. If you haven't played this game and you want to learn how to play it, how these cards work, you can just click the little link there to go to my run-through for the game, where you can learn how these cards work, how the game works. And of course I will be talking about the base game here as well. If you would like to check out the new expansion, Hellas and Elysium, that was just released here for Terraforming Mars, new maps, then go click that little link and go straight to my run-through for that one. Anyway, we are beginners. We have our 10 starting cards, and it's all very confusing. We're looking at them and, wow, what do they do, all these cards? Well, the thing is, you don't need to worry about all of them at once. What you try to look for in the beginning is production. I'm going to talk more about that later, but you're looking for these production cards, really. But let's talk about when the game starts playing, and you get 4 cards in your hand every round. So, the thing is, they cost 3 each, right? So, I mean, it depends a bit. If you have a good income, if you have played a bunch of cards at the start that raised your income or raised your TR up here. I forgot to put a marker there, by the way, but if you raised your TR up here and you have a bunch of money, then you're a bit more free in which cards you choose. But you need to be careful not to pick too many of these. I mean, these were all cheap cards, that's okay. If you have cards that are really expensive, maybe they can also not be played right away, then you should perhaps avoid them. Here's one that you might want to avoid. For example, this one has a requirement of 8% oxygen. If you get this early, well, you don't know. 8% oxygen, that could take a long time. Perhaps the heat will go all the way up, all the oceans will be out before we even get to 8% oxygen. So you might want to be a bit careful choosing a card that has a requirement that is really late game. It could be also that it requires you to be on 0 or +2 degrees in heat. That will also take some time before you reach that. You might not want to spend money right now and just sit and hold on to a card, especially since you have a bunch of cards you started with, since you're playing the Beginners Corporation. Like this one, +2 degrees is required there. Also, you really want to look for production cards, but I'll get more into that as we go. And so, for number 4, let's talk a bit about placement. So placement is really important in this game, depending a bit on how you play. If you play if you're going for having a lot of plant production, and you're going for perhaps getting a lot of cities out, then you are really into the whole sort of where to play stuff. If you could play the game differently, you could play a lot of event cards. You can play a lot of cards that are not related to the board, and you can still make a lot of points that way, but placement is important. So let's talk a bit about it. First of all, this is the area that's usually going to be, people are going to build in. There's a bunch of these good placement bonuses with 2 plants here. Someone might find Noctis City, which is a card for this reserved city here. People like to hang out over here. Also, down here we have some steel production. Over this one is really popular. If you can get to place an ocean early, you want to go for 2 titanium here, which could be really good, especially if you have, of course, it depends on your cards, but if you have cards that have that tag, the space tag that requires titanium, or at least the titanium helps you build them because it makes it cheaper. And also up here we have 2 cards, which is really good. That's a good spot for a card early, or not, for an ocean early to get more cards. So let's say we're in the situation here that yellow is over here, he built a city, green built a city here, some greeneries, he has a special tile out here, and it's your time to place a greenery. Now if you don't have placed any greeneries, you can place any tiles, you can place the greenery wherever you want. If let's say the city was mine over here, then I would have to place the greenery next to it, which wouldn't be that bad of course, because that would bring me points. But let's say that it's not mine, I can go anywhere I want. Maybe I've been doing some other stuff, so the other players have really gotten to the placement first. And it's time for me to place a greenery. I spent 8 plants. Well, looking at, it all depends on what you need. Do you need steel? Do you need titanium? There's some titanium over here. Do you need plants? You can get cards. Here you can get 2 plants, of course. And you don't, first of all, of course, you're not going to place it next to another player's city because that would just benefit them. But you could also be thinking a bit about, let's say you put it, I mean, let's say you can put out a city pretty soon. You have a card that can put it out, or you have the money for it and you want to do it. Then you could place it in a way, let's say you would place it here. You would get a plant, you would get $2 from the ocean next to it, and you're planning put the city here pretty soon. Because by doing that, of course, you have a spot here that both you and the yellow player are interested in getting a greenery for. Maybe he'll do it and you'll get a point for free. That could be something to think about. But placement is really important, and once it's you have the chance to place something down, you have to consider both what the opponents probably will do. Are they going to place stuff around where they already are? And also you have to consider points and also these bonuses. Maybe you have 6 plants, then it's quite good. Like in this case, you have 6 plants. Could be a good idea to place it somewhere, well, like here, where you get 2 plants, and then you have 8. So then in the same generation, you can place another greenery down. There's something to have in mind there. And so for my number 3 tip here is to have some thoughts about, I mean, it's all about production, right? This point here I'm trying to make on number 3, you need to get production, of course. You start out, if you're playing the basic variant, you start with 1 on everything. I usually play the advanced version or the corporate version where you start with 0 everything, but let's do it like this. And so, to raise your production, you need to, well, mostly you play cards. You have this brown background indicating that it's production that you're racing. So what do you want to go for? Well, it kind of depends on your strategy, of course. You could go for a lot of plants, trying to get a lot of greenies out, get points that way. But there's some general tips I would give you is, if you can, try to get energy going early. Because there's a lot of cards, especially the city cards, like this one, they require you to lower your energy production in order to get something else, or in order to actually play the card and get to place that city. So if you don't have 2 energy here, you can play this card. Now you shouldn't forget about the standard project. That's sort of a combined tip here, because here you can also pay 11 credits to raise your energy production by 1. So let's say you do 2 actions and you're at this stage here, you only have 1 energy production as we started out with. You could pay 11 to raise it, and then instantly play Underground City, where it will give you 2 production in steel. So that's a really good trade-off. You will go down here, but you go up in steel. Steel will help you with these buildings, the building tags. You also get to place a city here. And that's also something that you should consider. Maybe when you get your starting hand, and when you start getting cards as we go, you want to look at the tags. Don't forget about the tags, because these tags tell you sort of a lot of things about how you can play them. Let's say these are building tags, the brown one, they can be paid with steel, which means if you have a bunch of them, or if you're going for them, then of course you also want to have steel production, so it always ticks in every round. The stars here, the black star is for the titanium usage. And so it also depends on what kind of cards you get. I mean, this game is a lot sort of about adaptation, but try to get your production up as much as you can and as early as you can. And then there comes a point when you need to stop doing production, when you sort of realize that it's getting close to the end, we're up here somewhere, and you realize that, well, the game is about to end, there's no point in putting in a production card that would give you, let's say this one is really expensive, cost you 41, right? It gives you 2 credit production, 2 titanium production, but if we're in the end game, then it's not worth it, because you're paying 41, you're going to basically make 6 more credits plus 2 more there. So you're going to make 8 credits every round if you can use the titanium for other cards that have the symbol here, the tag. If you don't, then it's pretty much wasted, unless of course we have the awarding effect where you get minor, where you have to have as much steel and titanium as possible. But basically you need to sort of see somewhere, and you're going to learn this as you play, you're going to see that there's a point where it's time to stop focusing on production. But from the start of the game, get as much production as you can. My number two tip for beginners is to use the option of doing 1 or 2 actions. In Terraforming Mars, of course, you have the option, when it's your turn, you can play 1 card, do 1 action, you can do a standard project, you can get a milestone or award, you can put out a greenery, you can raise the heat and all that. You can do 1 action, or you can do 2. In some cases, you want to do 1. In most cases actually, because if you're not in a hurry, then just play 1 card, just do 1 thing, let the other players act, you see what they do and you can react to that. You can also sort of wait it out. Perhaps you have a card that requires you to be on 8% oxygen, and we're down here. Well, if you play 2 actions right off the bat, then the risk is that you're going to have to pass before we get over here. If you just play 1 action, it's going to take longer, the others are going to act, maybe they do 1 action. The chances are bigger that they are going to raise the oxygen so that you can play your card before the generation is over. You can also check out, that's also a tip, check out the other players' boards. How many plants do they have? How much heat do they have? Are they going to raise the heat this generation? If they have 8 plants, they are probably going to put out the greenery, because you don't want to save plants really. There's always that risk of someone sending an asteroid on you. So yeah, that's sort of for playing 1 action. Sometimes you do want to do 2 actions. Let's say you have 2 cards, or let's say you have 1 card that raises, let's say we are here, and you have 1 card that raises heat by 1, but you also have 8 heat in your storage. Then you can do 2 actions right away. You play the card, get to raise the heat, then you put out that action with 8 heat, which will raise it again, and you'll get the bonus of adding an ocean as well, which means you get a total of 3 TR raises that generation instead of just 2. And the same goes for up here with the oxygen. And at the start of the game, it's also really important, if you're the first one to raise it here, then someone else might be able to put out 2 raises at once and get that heat production. So you got to be careful with that. It's all about timing, trying to understand what are your opponents going to do and adapt to that. And my number 1 tip for new players in Terraforming Mars is to not forget about the milestones. This is something that I've seen happen a lot of times with new players, because there's so much to think about. In the beginning you have all your cards, you have planning and what do they cost you, do you have enough money, you calculate all that. Don't forget about the milestones. In the beginning of the game, I mean, if let's say you get a good plant production going really early, and you're going to be able to put out 3 greeneries, then you want to snatch gardener before anyone else does. So that's also something here where you have to look a bit up what are the other players doing. You are allowed to, look at the other players, see how many building tags have they played. Are they close to getting 8? How many have you played? Could you perhaps get that one before they do? Also, as a beginner, you start with 10 cards. It's a bit easier for you to get the planner. Have 16 cards in hand. It's harder if, I mean, a lot of times you're playing with people of different experience with the game. So some have the corporation, some have the beginner corporation. That could be something to go for as a beginner. Get 16 cards fast if you're playing against friends that have played this game a lot more and they are using corporations. You could get the planner. You also have the mayor, having 3 cities. That one could be hard to get, but let's say you started those 10 cards you had. Maybe there were 3 cities in there. You can build 3 cities in some way. And you also have the Terraformer, getting first with 35 in Terraformer rating. And that's really, I mean, it all depends on what kind of card engine you started out with. Sometimes it's not that hard if you're doing a lot of oxygen, a lot of stuff, so you're racing the TR, then Terraformer could be your thing. But I would recommend Planner for beginning players, and also perhaps you can also get Builder or Gardener or Mayor or Terraformer. So don't miss the milestones, don't forget about them. It's so easy. I've seen people sit with 3 cities and there's a space left here and they are not taking it. And if it's a new player, of course, I will tell them, don't forget about that. But if it's someone that played a few times, then I'm just going to take benefit of it instead. So I hope you enjoyed this little top 5 tips for beginning players in Terraforming Mars. And I love this game. I hope you do as well. If you want to check out more of my Terraforming Mars videos, you can just click the link up there to go straight to my playlist, where I have a bunch of videos. There's solo plays, there's run-throughs, there's expansion videos, all the stuff. Also, I have a video for this how to do these magnets that I have there, so you can check that out if you're interested in having that, and you'll have your cube stick to the board like that. It's really nice if you don't want to get an insert and such. So they're all there in my playlist, and thank you so much for watching, and I hope I will see you in the next one. Next time we're going to do another of these top 5 lists for Terraforming Mars, where I talk about strategy or cards or corporations and all that stuff, so together we can get better at this game. Also, tell me in the comment section, what are your best tips for beginners in Terraforming Mars? Or is there something you don't agree with me on? Just tell me and we can have a discussion in the comment field. And I really look forward to that. And also don't forget to tell your friends about the channel and subscribe. Just press the red button down here. And thank you so much for watching. Have a great evening or morning or whenever you're watching this. Take care. Bye bye.
Do you want to keep this little dragon this happy all day long? Then like the video. Boardgames with Niramas is sponsored by Alara Games in Sweden.